This year, we had 4 winners. I think you remember from my announcement yesterday. And the one team that we chose to share their results with you is Elon University. And hopefully you'll get a sense why after you get a chance to see their work. Let me give you a little context for those of you who weren't familiar with the case. Now, normally what I do is structure a specific problem that a front office is dealing with. And in this instance, instead of structuring a specific problem that a front office might be dealing with, I built the case around a data set. The data set happens to be the baseball prospectus pitch tunneling data that just came out. I think over this conference you've probably heard enough about pitch tunneling to actually understand it better than a lot of people who aren't at this conference by now. So I won't even go into that much. I think it'll be obvious and come out through the presentation. But I really left this fairly open-ended. I said to the student teams, there were 18 different teams, I said, please identify a problem that you think is or should be important to an MLB team that this data set can help you address. Then address the problem with some analytical work and present some findings and conclusions, okay? Now, recognize that whatever these folks are going to share with you today is at least partially limited by the specific data that they got. And oftentimes the data is not in the perfect form to answer all the questions we want to answer, even some of the basic questions we want to answer. So the fact that we don't have this at a pitch level, and I won't go into what I'm just talking about there, just recognize we don't have this at the level of granularity that perhaps we might have. I think that data will be coming from baseball prospectus down the road in the not too distant future, but for the purposes of this analysis, we didn't have the depth of data and the granularity that we would have liked to have. Well, with that, I'd like to just present to you the winning team from Elon University, and what we'll do is after they present, we will do a Q&A. Here you go, guys.
Hi, we're the Elon University Baseball Analytics team. My name is David Higgins. I'm a statistics major. Let's put this right here.
Okay, my name is Kyle Jankowski. I'm a finance and business analytics double major.
I'm Robert Nana. I'm a sport management and finance double major.
I'm Brad Clark. I'm a finance major.
And my name is Carl Sarrazin, and I'm a double major in statistics and sport management.
And we are here to present to you our take on this year's Diamond Dollars case competition, tunnel vision, and analysis of pitch sequence data.
So to begin, we're going to give a little background on the case, which is to utilize new pitch tunnel data to identify areas in which major league front offices can optimize their on-field performance. And through our analysis of this data, we recognize the problem that pitchers are not properly optimizing their pitch sequences, which is leading to less efficient outcomes. This led to our goal to explain how to maximize pitcher effectiveness by optimizing pitch selection along with using pitch tunnel data to improve pitch sequencing. Through this, we broke down our approach into 4 questions. What insights does pitch tunnel data provide in the effectiveness of pitchers? Which publicly available data sets can supplement the pitch tunnel data? How can we analyze the data and draw informative conclusions? And how can we translate our analysis into a usable tool that can provide a competitive advantage to teams? So in answering the first question, we had to first dive into the pitch tunnel data, which is broken into 7 different statistics. First, tunnel differential measures the distance between 2 pitches at the point where a hitter must decide if he's going to swing or not. Next, plate differential is the difference between 2 pitches at the plate. Break differential measures the spin-induced movement between the plate and the tunnel point. Release differential is the variation between a pitcher's release points. Break tunnel ratio compares the two. Break differential and tunnel differential, while release tunnel ratio helps show how well a pitcher can mask his pitch from the release point through the tunnel point. And finally, flight time differential measures the speed change between 2 pitches. To help illustrate this, we have created 2 video overlays, On the left, Noah Syndergaard is throwing a fastball and a slider, and on the right, Ubaldo Jimenez is throwing a slider and a curveball. As you can see with Noah Syndergaard, his two release points are almost identical, both coming from the exact same arm slot, while Ubaldo Jimenez releases one pitch from a much different arm slot than the other, with 7.2 inches difference between his two release points. While Noah Syndergaard has a very small release difference between his pitches, this helps mask his pitches and makes it harder for hitters to decide whether, or decipher what the pitch is, while Ubaldo Jimenez often tips his pitches through showing this difference. This is just beginning to show how pitch tunnel data can be used to help hitters along with pitchers.
So the next step we wanted to take in answering the questions in this case is finding which publicly available data sets could supplement this pitch tunnel data. So along with the pitch tunnel data provided by Baseball Prospectus, we also decided that PitchFX data would be appropriate. Retrieved via Python script, we retrieved all MLB game day data since 2008. This data would allow us to show pitch sequences, where the ball ended up, and pitcher-batter matchups. This data would also allow us to aggregate batter statistics so we could see how they performed against different types of pitch sequences. So one problem we found when we had these two data sets is that they were measuring two different types of pitches. While Baseball Prospectus classified only 6 different pitch types, PitchFX classified considerably more. After analyzing the trends in which these classification systems worked, we decided we needed to merge some of the PitchFX classifications into one singular classification. For example, while PitchFX was classifying both two-seam fastballs and sinkers, Prospectus was only classifying sinkers. So we merged these two PitchFX two-seam fastballs and sinkers into one sinker classification. We can also see this with curveballs, as PitchFX was classifying curves, knuckle curves, and ephyses. Prospectus was only classifying curveballs. So we combined this into one single classification so then we could work with the same data sets as one.
So now that we had all this great data, we had to decide how we're going to analyze it and what informative conclusions we could draw from it. So using the pitcher measurements, the batter statistics, the situational inputs that we had from PitchFX, we could try and estimate the likelihood that any particular event would occur. Specifically, we're looking at swinging strikes because we figure that a swinging strike is the most optimal event that a pitcher can induce, whereas generally a strike in general with a swinging strike, called strike, or foul ball would be an alternative event that a pitcher is trying to achieve. And so with this in mind, we created what we're calling our pitch machine. We're branding it the pitch machine, which is a series of 70 pro-bit regression models, 35 of them in total for each of the swinging strike or any strike in general, one for each of the 35 different pitch sequences. And each one is going to predict the probability of a strike, swing or otherwise, for all of these possible pitch sequences and combinations. And between the pitcher matchups, the pitcher-batter matchups, the counts, the locations, there's over 3.5 billion different combinations of events that we can try and run through. And so what the pitch machine does is it takes all this into mind and outputs the pitch and location that will result in the highest probability of resulting in the requested event, whether that be a swinging strike or a strike in general. And if that was all too much statistical jargon, whatever, this is a nice graphic for you all where we have the 3 types of inputs. We have the pitcher inputs, all 7 of the variables provided by Baseball Prospectus. We have the situational inputs, the count, and the previous pitch type, which is going to work with our pitch sequences and combinations provided by Baseball Prospectus. And we have the batter inputs, which is the swing strike percentage or general strike percentage for the specific batter we're looking at against the specific pitch combination. This all goes into our pitch machine, and it outputs the recommended pitch type and location for any of the 3.5 billion combinations that we have. And if you did like the stats jargon, here's a picture of some of our Stata code. All this work was done in Stata. We were also using SQL and a bit of Python. We've got some data cleaning on here, a couple of loops to run through all of those 70 different regressions.
So while it's great to have all these regression equations, ultimately what we wanted to do was create a workable tool that could give MLB teams a competitive advantage right now. So that brings us to our pitch machine. The pitch machine is a fully interactive interface in which you can define a pitcher, a batter, the previous pitch thrown, a count, and then an intended result, meaning if you wanted to generate a swinging strike or just a strike in general. We can see this in the example with Justin Verlander. As soon as the batter input is put in and the other inputs are put in, the pitch machine outputs an optimal pitch based on what Justin Verlander can throw next and an optimal location. In this case, we're looking for a strike, and we can see the pitch machine predicts that if Verlander were to throw this cutter up in the zone, it would result in a strike, either swinging or looking or a foul ball, 71% of the time. And if we were to move forward within this at-bat and it was a 2-1 count, we can see Justin Verlander may be looking for a swinging strike. In this case, the pitch machine predicts that a fastball up in this 2-1 count would be the optimal pitch for Verlander to throw. To generate a swinging strike, we predict 17% of the time. And then if this pitch is a swinging strike and Verlander gets this to a 2-2 count, we can see the machine predicts a curveball down and in to Cano would be the optimal pitch to get Cano swinging, which we would expect to result in a swinging strike 30% of the time. Now, so we can see how this can work with an individual batter-pitcher matchup through the length of a count. It can also work with any theoretical batter-pitcher matchup, as shown by the examples here. The pitch machine takes into account the strength of a pitcher's repertoire, the situation which is inputted, and batter swinging strike tendencies to result in an optimal pitch for any situation.
So now that we know that we can use any pitcher-batter matchup to find a resulted or a desired pitch type and location, we can also translate this to real game situations, and what better game than Game 7 of the 2016 World Series between the Cubs and the Indians. And based on the results that we ran through our pitch machine, we believe that we could have extended the curse one more year. So we start with our first matchup, which was actually the first matchup of the game, with Corey Kluber against Dexter Fowler. As you can see from the GIF, that Corey Kluber leaves a sinker over the middle of the zone, which Dexter Fowler takes over the center field fence, giving the Cubs a 1-run lead and ultimately the momentum to start the game. This was a 2-1 count that he threw the pitch, and as you can see, this was not the optimal pitch for this situation. In fact, a slider on the lower half inside part of the plate to Dexter Fowler, because of the less than 2-inch release differential of Kluber's slider, as well as a 17% swing rate that Dexter Fowler has on sliders as opposed to only 2% on fastballs or sinker, we would expect a swinging strike about 25% of the time in this count. So as we move on later into the game, we get Aroldis Chapman against Rajai Davis in the bottom of the 8th inning, 2-2 count. Aroldis Chapman decides to throw a fastball, which Rajai Davis then takes over the left field fence, tying up the game and keeping the Indians' hopes alive. As you can see, again, not the optimal location or pitch that would be most effective in producing a swinging strike. Instead, we would prefer a changeup down in the zone that we expect to produce a swinging strike 30% of the time due to the 49 milliseconds of flight differential on the fastball changeup sequence for Aroldis Chapman, as well as Rajai Davis's 22% swing and miss rate on that specific sequence. And so finally, we move to our last matchup, which ultimately was the deciding factor in the game, Brian Shaw against Ben Zobrist. Brian Shaw throwing a cutter on the outside part of the zone, and Ben Zobrist smacking it down the third base line, which is ultimately the game-winning double for the game and giving the Cubs the lead. Again, as you can see, this pitch sequence was not the optimal location or pitch type for the situation. In fact, a slider on the inner half in zone 6 would have been expected to produce a swinging strike over 50% of the time and ultimately could have struck out Ben Zobrist in a 1-2 count and kept the Indians going into the bottom half of the 10th. And partially, the reason that the cutter and the slider difference is 22 inches of plate differential, which, again, would have switched up the visual for Ben Zobrist and ultimately been expected to produce a swinging strike, as you see, 55% of the time. But as well as using this in game situations, we can also use this in more mainstay uses and future applications for MLB front offices.
So, with the week we had to work on the case, we were really excited with what we came up with and confident that it can be a mainstay in MLB front offices across the league. We came up with 3 scenarios where our pitch machine can be used to game plan on a day-to-day basis. First, let's look at how the pitch machine can create data-driven scouting reports for pitchers. So, having to carve through a lineup on a nightly basis is a really tough task for a pitcher. Having 30 starts a year, it can get tough in the August and September timeframe to keep up a high level of performance. So with our pitch machine, you can find the optimal sequencing to maximize a pitcher's efficiency and carve through lineups with a lot more ease than just guessing and going off of film study. For our second scenario, let's change the perspective to the batters. So batters can anticipate a pitcher's most efficient sequences and optimal sequences to get a leg up on what to expect in certain game situations. For our third approach, we focus on scouting. For a scouting basis, I call it the diamond in the rough approach. So you can look at guys who have effective sequences and how they maximize their efficiency through using these sequences and hitting their location on a consistent basis, therefore optimizing their sequences and maximizing their efficiency at a high rate. Now, with all this in mind, let's refresh ourselves on our approach from the top.
First, in answering the question, what insights does pitch tunnel data provide into effectiveness of pitcher, we looked into both the data itself as well as creating 2 video overlays of Noah Syndergaard and Ubaldo Jimenez, highlighting the effect a differential and release point can have on a bat.
We then looked into publicly available databases in order to supplement the baseball prospectus data and show how the effect of tunnel data can result in effectiveness on the field.
Using this data, we created what we're calling the pitch machine, which is a series of 70 different probit regressions, one for each of the different 35 pitch sequences.
And finally, we were able to translate our pitch machine into real game situations as well as further applications that can be used every day in MLB front offices to gain a competitive advantage.
In conclusion, we took 9 years of data, which included over 6 million data points, and turned it into a user-friendly interface. An MLB front office can simply plug in a game situation and a desired output, while our pitch machine will produce the highest probability pitch and location to get that desired output. This gives pitchers who are struggling with lack of efficiency in their pitch sequencing a chance to maximize their efficiency and by optimizing their sequencing. And with that, we'd like to welcome Vince back up here and have him moderate our question and answer.
Boy, if I ever felt I've obsoleted myself, I think it's about right now. I don't know why I'm up here even. These guys are unbelievable. David.
Yeah, I have a question about the machine's ability to learn, perhaps. Let's assume a plate appearance of 5 pitches. That's 4 sequences, as I understand, correct? You're looking at the last sequence, the last 2 pitches in order to, or the last pitch, in order to predict the next best efficient, most efficient pitch. How about the previous pitches? Does the machine take into account what's happened in those previous pitches and in those previous sequences?
Currently, it does not, but this, right now in its current form, this isn't meant to be something where you're plugging in for every single pitch, because you may find that for someone like Aroldis Chapman, his fastball slider combination is very lethal, and therefore it might recommend you throw that every time. But obviously that's not something you want to do. A hitter will pick up on that. So right now it's more of in those very high leverage situations where you really need a swinging striker, you really need that strikeout. This is something that you can use to try and increase your chances of obtaining a desirable result.
So the machine, for example, if it called for a sinker away, it would not take into account that perhaps during that at-bat there had previously been a sinker away.
Right, in its current form, it does not take that into account.
But of course, we could make this a 3-pitch sequence model or a 4-pitch sequence model. It's just that, in 6 days' time, this was the practical. No, I got you. I got you. I'm getting defensive for you guys now. Other questions? Yes.
How do you propose explaining to pitchers, communicating this idea to them without them feeling like they're becoming robots?
I believe the way analytics has to be integrated into any front office is there's always 2 sides of it. There's obviously like the on-field perspective, and analytics is supposed to be used to supplement this. This is supposed to be used to help players and try to maximize their effectiveness. We can't control what the pitchers end up doing, but we can control our suggestions, and we can tell them that given that this is the scenario, this is what we would suggest. This is the data, we would explain it to them, and ultimately it is on the playing side. There's differing opinions, there's obviously a scouting perspective, but I believe that's the best way to integrate analytics, is use it as supplementary to the game and try and just maximize their effectiveness.
Right. And another thing to keep in mind is that while we can recommend an ideal pitch and location, it's ultimately up to the player to execute. So if we recommend a pitch down in the zone and he leaves it hanging, we can't control that. So it's up to the player to really execute, to make this a really usable and effective tool.
I will just add to that the process, I think, of helping seed this in an organization would be to get the pitching coach, the manager, the catcher, the catching staff on board, have them really understand the why behind it, and giving them, of course, the encouragement that if you're reading the hitter, starting to anticipate what the sequence calls for, then go away from it and don't don't use it. And then also introducing it to the pitchers. But it's not a matter of just sort of going to the pitchers and telling them here's the answer. It's a matter of getting the whole organization to coalesce around a new approach that's data-based. And keep in mind, too, this only includes called strikes and swinging strikes. It doesn't really, or in foul strikes, it doesn't really include all potential outcomes. If you want to induce a ground ball, you might throw a different pitch, right? Other questions? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, one more, Perry. Did you differentiate that? Chases outside of the zone versus?
Right. Yeah. So actually, as we can see, if we go back to one of our examples, in the Cano one specifically, it takes into account all the zones provided by PitchFX. So right here oh boy, help. There we go. So this particular sequence to Cano, this pitch is actually, the pitch suggested to induce the swinging strike is a curveball outside the zone. Zones 1, 2, 9, the center of the strike zone right there, and then 11, 12, 13, and 14 are actually out of the zone. So this pitch would actually be suggested as a chase pitch out of the zone, probably because of the 2-2 count. If it were 3-2, it'd probably be something closer than the zone. But since we've taken into account the swing percentages of the past, it has shown that this has worked the most in this zone, which is a chase pitch.
To your point, though, if let's say it's a 1-2 count and you want to model a swinging strike, you could constrain it, I'm sure, to say we only want non-strikes, so that the default is it's a ball if it's not a swinging strike, or most likely, rather than he's on it and he's going to do damage with it. If say you're way ahead in the count, so I'm sure you could constrain the model and set up the parameters anyway. They've already created a set of inputs. Another input could be the zone restrictions of where you want the ball to end up. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, of course. So each of the 7 stats provided by Baseball Prospectus are all their individual unique input into the model. And that's sort of to get a feel for each of the different pitchers, because we have over 750 current pitchers just that pitched last year in 2016. And for each of the different sequences, we have 35 of them, like I had mentioned. Each of the 7 statistics will have varying levels of significance depending on the sequence. We have a different model for each of them. And so depending on what pitch is being thrown, different variables may or may not be significant.
So yeah, I'll add to that in the sense that there's a lot that goes into inducing a swinging strike, and that's why we brought in the hitter data too and the pitcher data too to help explain that. And I think that the pitch tunneling data is a piece of that, and understanding tunnel differential and understanding all these different post-tunnel break statistics help us explain why so-and-so can't hit a curveball on a 1-2 pitch. So it helps us explain why certain situations happen.
What would be interesting is to see what aspect of the tunneling data has the greatest explanatory power and recommending power, predictive power on the swing. So how much of it is the release tunnel differential, how much it is the brake tunnel ratio, and so forth. That would be an interesting byproduct of this. You've aggregated it, lumped it all together because you wanted a predictive model, but if you took the approach of getting an explanatory model, then you could actually dissect it and understand which of those has the relevant, are the most relevant aspects. Well, thank you so much for your time, and hope you enjoyed the conference today, and congratulations again to this team.